The static from her grandfather's old police radio filled the garage like whispered secrets. And Sloane Mitchell pressed her palm against the speaker, feeling the vibrations travel through her bones the same way his lessons had, deep, permanent, and impossible to forget. She was 17, but her hands knew things they shouldn't. The CB radio crackled with phantom voices from a decade ago, when Badge 4127 still meant something on the streets of Baltimore. When her grandfather would let her sit on his lap in this very garage, teaching her to decode the numbers that meant robbery, assault, officer down, back when she was 8 and thought police codes were just another language to learn, like Spanish in school or the sign language her deaf neighbor used. She'd learned other things in this garage, too, things that started the summer after she witnessed Mrs. Chen get robbed at gunpoint outside the grocery store. Things that began with "never be a victim, kiddo," and evolved into pressure points, joint locks, and the exact angle needed to dislocate a thumb without permanent damage. Temporary compliance through controlled pain, her grandfather had called it. Sometimes the badge isn't enough. Sometimes you need to speak a language everyone understands. Sloane clicked off the radio and stood, her reflection caught in the dusty mirror propped against the wall. She looked nothing like someone who could hurt you. 5'4", runner's build. Dark hair always pulled back in the same ponytail. The kind of girl who sat in the back of class taking notes nobody asked to borrow. The kind of girl bullies saw as prey. Preston Academy would be her 4th school in 3 years. Not because she was trouble, because her father analyzed the kind of trouble that followed you home. FBI analysts didn't get combat pay, but they got credible death threats from cartel lawyers and midnight relocations when a case went sideways. The official story was always job transfer. The real story lived in the Glock her mother kept in her nightstand and the panic button installed in their kitchen. "You ready for tomorrow?" Her mother appeared in the garage doorway, still wearing her counselor's badge from the middle school where she worked. Different district. Same worried expression she'd worn since Phoenix. Since Dad's testimony put away 3 trafficking ringleaders, and their lawyer promised to visit his family. "Ready as I'll ever be," Sloane said, which wasn't really an answer. Her mother stepped closer, fingers reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind Sloane's ear. "You don't have to hide who you are forever. You know, what Grandpa taught you, it's not something to be ashamed of." "I'm not ashamed," Sloane pulled away gently. Once people know what you can do, they look at you different. They either fear you or they test you. Neither ends well." Speaking from experience, Sloane thought about Riverside High, where she'd broken Brad Morrison's wrist when he cornered her in the art supply closet. About Desert Vista, where 3 girls jumped her in the bathroom and learned what a properly applied chokehold felt like. About every time she'd had to choose between being a victim and revealing the predator that lived beneath her quiet exterior. Something like that? Her mother's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and Sloane saw her jaw tighten the way it did when Dad texted from a new burner phone. "He's okay," her mother said without being asked. Surveillance just picked up chatter about the Brennan Network expanding into the Mid-Atlantic. Private schools, specifically, using kids from connected families. Sloane's stomach turned. The Brennan Network, the same organization her father had spent 2 years building a case against. The reason they'd left Phoenix with 2 hours' notice and fake names. "And we're moving to a private school in Maryland because hiding in plain sight works better than running forever." Her mother's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd had this argument with herself 1,000 times. "Preston Academy has excellent security. Politicians' kids, diplomats' families. The kind of place where everyone has secrets and nobody asks questions. The kind of place where connected families send their kids. Sloane said quietly. Her mother's silence was answer enough. That night, Sloane lay in bed listening to the police scanner app on her phone, a habit she couldn't break. Even though Grandpa had been gone 2 years now, the codes washed over her like a lullaby. 10-4, 10-20, 10-54. Copy that. What's your location? Possible dead body. The language of emergency, of control in chaos. She'd need it tomorrow. She could feel it in her bones, the way Grandpa used to feel rain coming in his bad knee. Preston Academy might have excellent security, but Sloane had learned long ago that the most dangerous predators wore school uniforms and perfect smiles. The next morning arrived wrapped in typical September humidity, the kind that made her cotton shirt stick to her skin before she even reached the main building. Preston Academy looked like a movie set, red brick buildings drowning in ivy. Manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than her father's salary. The parking lot was a luxury car dealership, and Sloane's used Honda looked like a food stamp in a country club. She'd timed her arrival perfectly late enough to avoid the social gauntlet of early birds, early enough to find her classes without seeming lost. The hallways smelled like fresh paint and old money, and every face that passed her carried the casual confidence of someone who'd never had to count exit routes. "You must be the new girl." The voice came from behind her, smooth as expensive whiskey and just as likely to leave you reeling. Sloane Mitchell, right transfer from Phoenix. She turned to find exactly what she'd expected, 6 feet of lacrosse-sculpted muscle wrapped in a Preston blazer. Blonde hair that fell perfectly across green eyes. Smile that had definitely talked its way out of speeding tickets. His name tag read, Tyler Brennan, Student Council President. But everything else about him screamed apex predator. "News travels fast," Sloane said, keeping her voice neutral. She'd learned to recognize trouble in Phoenix, and Tyler Brennan wore his like cologne, subtle but unmistakable. "Small school, we're like family here." He stepped closer, just inside the boundary of polite conversation. A dominance move so textbook she almost laughed. "I'm Tyler. I run the welcome committee. Among other things, lacrosse captain, student council basically, if you need anything. I'm your guy." 3 other boys materialized around them like hunting dogs responding to a whistle, all lacrosse players, judging by their builds and matching team jackets despite the heat. Jake, Connor, and Ryan, according to their tags, the kind of backup that turned conversations into confrontations. "That's very welcoming," Sloane said, clutching her schedule tighter. Her grandfather's voice echoed when they travel in packs. They're either scared or hunting. Figure out which before they do. We take care of our own here. Tyler's smile never wavered, but something shifted in his eyes. "Speaking of which, there are some unofficial rules you should know about, places that are off-limits. Times when certain areas are occupied. Wouldn't want you stumbling into somewhere you shouldn't be." Connor laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Yeah, new girl doesn't want to end up like Katie Morrison. Remember her? Thought she could go wherever she wanted. Ask whatever questions popped into her head." "What happened to Katie Morrison?" Sloane asked, though she already knew she wouldn't like the answer. "Transferred," Ryan said, examining his nails. "Suddenly, mental health issues," they said. "Shame. Really? She was pretty." The threat hung in the air like humidity, thick and suffocating. Sloane felt the familiar itch in her palms, the muscle memory of how easy it would be to drop all 4 of them before they knew what hit them. Tyler's thumb was exposed where he hooked it in his belt. One grab, one twist. And his welcome committee would learn what Badge 4127 had taught his granddaughter about handling bullies. Instead, she smiled the vacant, harmless smile she'd perfected across 3 schools. "Thanks for the warning. I'm not really the curious type." Tyler studied her for a moment longer, and she saw him categorize her quiet new girl. No social capital, no threat. Perfect prey. "Smart girl. Enjoy your first day. Sloan. Remember, we're all family here." They moved off in formation, and Sloan released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The tattoo on Tyler's wrist, visible when his sleeve rode up, looked like a lacrosse stick at first glance, but she'd seen enough gang ink to recognize a stylized B when she saw one. Brennan Network. Her father had been right. They were recruiting from private schools now, using kids whose families had lawyers on retainer and senators on speed dial, kids who could move product across state lines in lacrosse gear bags and never get searched because their last names opened doors and closed investigations. The day crawled by in a blur of syllabi and seating charts. Sloan chose her spots carefully back row, clear sight lines to exits, never the corner where you could get boxed in. Teachers introduced her with the same rehearsed enthusiasm, and classmates offered the kind of polite disinterest that said she'd been evaluated and dismissed as irrelevant, which was exactly what she wanted. By 6th period, she'd mapped the school's layout, identified 17 security cameras, 3 of them dummies, and cataloged which teachers actually paid attention and which ones sleepwalked through their lectures. AP Government with Ms. Chen, different Chen. No relation to the robbery victim proved interesting. The woman had prosecutor's eyes, sharp and calculating behind designer frames. "We'll be studying systemic power structures this semester," Ms. Chen announced, her gaze lingering on Tyler's empty seat. "How legitimate authority can be corrupted, and how citizens can respond within legal frameworks." Someone snorted. "Legal frameworks don't mean much when Daddy owns the judge." Ms. Chen's smile was sharp as a verdict. "That's exactly the kind of cynicism we'll be examining, Mr. Patterson. Though I'd argue that ownership is harder to maintain than you'd think. Even judges have oversight." Sloan made a mental note. Ms. Chen was either incredibly naive or playing a longer game than anyone realized. The final bell released her into afternoon chaos, and Sloan navigated toward her locker, already planning her route home. Avoid the main exit, where Tyler's crew held court. Cut through the arts wing, where the theater kids created enough drama to mask a quick departure. Home by 4. Police scanner on by 4:15. Homework done in the garage, where the static made her feel less alone. But first, she needed her history textbook from her locker. The hallways had that post-last bell energy, half empty and echoing with distant laughter. She worked her combination, thinking about the essay assignment on constitutional rights when she heard it. "Told you the Baltimore shipment was too hot. Feds all over the port since that analyst started sniffing around." Sloan's hand froze on her lock. The voice came from around the corner, carried by the acoustic quirk of intersecting hallways. She recognized Tyler's lazy drawl immediately. "So, we adjust." Another voice, Jake, she thought. "Tournament season starts next week. Nobody searches lacrosse gear at away games. Nobody questions team equipment trucks crossing state lines." Your brother's connection's still solid, Connor, this time. Because if the college network falls apart, my brother's got it handled. Senator Daddy made sure the investigation stays focused on the ports, not the schools. As long as we keep the pipeline moving through sports programs, we're invisible. Sloane pressed herself against the lockers, heart hammering. This was exactly what her father had theorized the Brennan network adapting, using privilege as camouflage, moving product through the very institutions meant to protect kids from drugs. What about the new girl? Her blood turned to ice. Mitchell. What about her? Tyler sounded bored. She's nobody. Scared little mouse who'll keep her head down like all the others. I don't know. Man, the way she looked at you this morning, you're paranoid. But fine. We'll test her. See if she's stupid enough to stick her nose where it doesn't belong. If she is, Tyler's voice dropped lower. Well, we've got ways of handling curious girls, don't we? Boys? Footsteps echoed closer. Sloane had seconds to decide run and confirm their suspicions, or play it cool and risk running straight into them. Her grandfather's training kicked in when cornered. Change the game. Become what they don't expect. She slammed her locker shut and walked directly toward the voices. Calculus textbook clutched to her chest like armor. Tyler and his crew rounded the corner just as she approached, and she let out a small gasp of surprise that would have won her a drama award. Oh, sorry, I was just, she gestured vaguely at her book, playing flustered new girl to perfection. Tyler's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second before his politician's smile returned. Sloane, still finding your way around. The hallways all look the same, she said, adding a nervous laugh that tasted like battery acid. I keep getting turned around. Happens to everyone, Connor said, but his eyes were doing the math. How long had she been there? What had she heard? Was she a problem that needed solving? Jake stepped closer, using his bulk to intimidate. You know, some parts of the school are confusing on purpose. Easy to end up somewhere you shouldn't be. Somewhere private. Like the equipment room, Ryan added helpfully. Lots of expensive gear in there. Wouldn't want anyone getting hurt by accident. The threat was about as subtle as a hand grenade. Sloane widened her eyes, letting them see fear they expected. Oh, I wouldn't. I just go to class and go home. I'm not really the exploring type. Good, Tyler said, reaching out to pat her shoulder. The touch was light but possessive, meant to establish dominance. Because accidents happen when people explore too much. Wouldn't want Preston's newest student getting hurt on her second day. They moved past her in their practiced formation, and Sloane counted to 30 before allowing herself to breathe normally. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced. She'd heard enough to confirm her father's intelligence was good. The Brennan network was using Preston Academy as a hub, moving product through sports programs. She needed to get home, needed to think, needed to figure out how to warn her father without blowing her cover or endangering her family more than they already were. But first, she had lacrosse practice to watch. Not officially, of course. But the equipment room Tyler's crew had specifically warned her about, and it shared a ventilation system with the old gymnastics storage area, a detail she'd noticed on the school's evacuation map. And that storage area had been marked closed for renovation for the past 3 years. According to the dust patterns, perfect place for a girl to practice her climbing. The coping mechanism her therapist had recommended after Phoenix. When the walls started closing in and her grandfather's voice got too loud in her head. Find something physical that makes you feel in control, Dr. Martinez had said. Channel the anxiety into movement. She'd meant yoga, probably. Maybe running. Definitely not free climbing abandoned structures to maintain surveillance skills. The gymnastics storage area was exactly as neglected as she'd hoped. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through dirty windows, and old equipment created an obstacle course of balance beams and pommel horses. The ventilation grate was 12 feet up, accessible if you knew how to use a rope ladder improvised from old climbing harnesses. Sloane had done this before. Different schools, different targets. Same principle, know your enemy before they know you're watching. She climbed in silence, each movement calculated to disturb nothing. Leave no trace. The metal grate was loose, someone else's reconnaissance. Maybe. Or just years of neglect. Voices drifted up through the vents, clear as a wiretap. Michigan State Contact says they can move 30 units through the tournament. Gotta be pharmaceutical grade. None of that street trash. Senator Brennan's campaign fund needs a donation by the 20th. She pulled out her phone, switching to voice recorder. Not admissible in court. But her father would know how to parallelize the intelligence, build a case from legitimate sources. The conversation painted a picture of an operation that would make her dad's Phoenix case look like a lemonade stand. Then Tyler's voice cut through the chatter. What about insurance? Can't have another Katie Morrison situation. Already handled, Connor replied. That nosy little reporter thought she could expose us through the school paper. Iris Chen's keeping her mouth shut now. She better. One story about missing equipment funds and our whole operation. Relax. Nobody believes the conspiracy theorist who already burned bridges with that cheating scandal story. She's radioactive. Perfect fall guy if we need one. Sloane's grip tightened on her phone. Iris Chen. She'd seen that name on the journalism awards in the trophy case 3 years running. Until this year's conspicuous absence, another casualty of Tyler's family. Speaking of insurance, Jake's voice carried a cruel edge. Maybe it's time we tested the new girl properly. She was awfully close to this hallway earlier. Tomorrow, Tyler decided. After practice. Marcy's got that freshman locked down for lookout, the one whose phone we've got those photos on. Nobody will interrupt. Locker room. Perfect. Cameras conveniently malfunction in that wing, always have. Tyler's laugh made Sloane's skin crawl. We'll see if little Miss Mitchell is as innocent as she pretends. And if she's not, well, thumbs are surprisingly fragile. Ask Katie Morrison. The group dispersed, their laughter echoing through empty corridors like a promise of violence. Sloane stayed frozen in position for 10 more minutes, muscles burning, making sure they were truly gone. Then she descended carefully, each movement deliberate, despite the rage shaking her hands. They were planning to assault her. Tomorrow. In the locker room where cameras didn't work and screams didn't carry, where Katie Morrison learned what happened to curious girls, and Iris Chen learned silence was safer than truth. Sloane's reflection caught in a dusty mirror propped against the wall, and for a moment she saw her grandfather's eyes staring back, the same calm before violence, the same coiled readiness. Sometimes you have to be the threat they don't see coming. He'd told her once, sometimes the badge isn't enough to stop bad people. Sometimes you have to speak their language. Tomorrow, Tyler Brennan would learn that Sloane Mitchell spoke fluent violence. But first, she had preparations to make. The morning came wrapped in dense fog, the kind that turned Preston Academy into a ghost ship floating in gray nothing. Sloane stood at her bedroom window, watching the mist swallow the street outside. She'd slept 90 minutes total, her mind running scenarios like her grandfather used to run drills. Center mass, solar plexus, floating ribs, she whispered, her fingers moving through phantom strikes. Control the space, control the narrative. Her phone buzzed a text from an unknown number equipment room. 7 a.m. Come alone, or the whole school sees the video. She almost laughed. They thought they were blackmailing her with a video that didn't exist yet. Classic intimidation tactic. Assuming fear would make her stupid. They had no idea she'd been recording their conversations, mapping their patterns, preparing for exactly this moment. Sloane dressed carefully, sports bra under her regular shirt, harder to grab, harder to tear, hair in a tight bun, no ponytail to yank. Her grandfather's old patrol ring on her right hand, the badge number worn smooth, but the edges still sharp enough to matter. Small camera pen clipped to her pocket, the kind Dad used for field work. "You're up early." Her mother stood in the doorway, coffee mug steaming in her hands. The shadows under her eyes said she'd been monitoring communications all night. "Couldn't sleep," Sloane said, which wasn't a lie. Her mother studied her, seeing past the careful normalcy. "Your father called. The Baltimore office is moving on the Brennan network this week. Something about a tournament providing cover for a major shipment." "That's good," Sloane said, pulling on her jacket. "Maybe we can finally stop running." "Maybe." Her mother set down the coffee, crossed the room, and pulled Sloane into a fierce hug. "Whatever happens today, remember, you're not alone. You're never alone." Sloane held on longer than usual, breathing in her mother's lavender shampoo and the safety it represented. Then she stepped back, shouldered her bag, and headed for the door. "Sloane," her mother's voice stopped her. "Your grandfather would be proud, but he'd also want you to be smart. Violence is a language, but it's not the only one you speak." The drive to school felt both endless and too quick. Sloane parked in her usual spot, noting Tyler's BMW already in the lot along with 3 other familiar cars. They were eager, probably been planning this all night, high on their own power. She didn't go to the equipment room. Instead, she went to the journalism lab, where a single light burned despite the early hour. Iris Chen looked up from her computer, hollow-eyed and defensive, ready to flee or fight. "I know what they did to you," Sloane said without preamble. "And I know what they're planning to do to me." Iris's laugh was bitter as old coffee. "Then you know I can't help you. They have photos, videos, threats against your family." Sloane pulled out her phone, showed Iris the recordings from yesterday. "They have insurance, but I have evidence." The color drained from Iris's face as she listened to Tyler's crew discussing shipments, tournaments, murder. "How did you—" "Not important. What matters is that in about 20 minutes, they're going to assault me in the locker room, and I'm going to defend myself. But I need someone recording the aftermath. Someone who knows how to protect digital evidence and get it to the right people." "You're insane," Iris whispered. "You have no idea what they're capable of." "My grandfather was a cop for 30 years, Sloane interrupted. "My father builds federal cases against trafficking networks. I know exactly what they're capable of. The question is, are you tired of being their victim?" Iris stared at her for a long moment. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a hard drive labeled Insurance. "I never stopped investigating," she admitted, "just stopped publishing. Every transaction, every threat, every kid they've hurt, it's all here. But without proof of violence. It's just high school gossip." "Then let's get you proof." Sloane left Iris with instructions: stay hidden, camera ready, Officer Ramirez on speed dial. The SRO was her grandfather's old partner, the only adult in the building she trusted. He'd believe Iris if she said Sloane was in trouble. The locker room was empty when she arrived. that chlorine and sweat smell heavy in the air. Sloane chose her position carefully back to the wall. Clear path to 2 exits. Bench between her and the main entrance. She pulled out her history textbook and pretended to study. Camera pen activated and angled toward the door. She didn't have to wait long. Tyler entered first, flanked by his crew plus 2 more she didn't recognize. 6 total. They'd brought reinforcements. Behind them, a skinny freshman stood guard at the door. Must be Marcy, the one they had leverage on. Studying. Tyler's voice dripped false concern. In the locker room. That's weird. Sloane. Really weird. Quiet place, she said, not looking up. Helps me focus. Funny thing about quiet places, Connor said, moving to block 1 exit. Nobody hears when things get loud. Jake flanked her other side. We know you were listening yesterday. That's a problem. I don't know what you're talking about. Sloane turned a page, noting positions, calculating angles, Ryan by the lockers, 2 unknowns hanging back. Tyler approaching direct. See, that's the thing, Tyler said. Sitting on the bench beside her, too close. Lying makes this worse. We were gonna just check if you were wearing a wire. Maybe rough you up a little. But now you're insulting our intelligence. His hand landed on her textbook, pressing it closed. Let's try again. What did you hear? Nothing that concerns me. Truth, their drug operation was her father's concern, not hers. Tyler's face darkened. Wrong answer. He grabbed for her shirt collar. Sloane had been waiting for this moment since she was 8 years older, since Mrs. Chen's robbery taught her that monsters wore human faces, and sometimes the only language they understood was pain. She didn't think. She reacted. Her left hand trapped Tyler's wrist, while her right found his thumb, bending it back at the exact angle her grandfather had shown her. The joint separated with a wet pop, and Tyler's scream echoed off tile walls. Federal Statute 18-111, she said calmly as he dropped to his knees. Assault with intent. That's your first mistake. The room exploded into motion. Connor charged from the left. She pivoted, used his momentum against him, guided his thumb into the wrong angle until anatomy did the rest. Another scream. Jake came at her with a wrestler's stance. But she'd been trained by someone who'd taken down bigger men in darker places. Sidestep, redirect, pressure point behind the elbow that made him forget his own name. Then his thumb, too, methodical as typing. Stop her! Tyler screamed through tears, cradling his destroyed hand. The 2 unknowns hesitated. They'd expected to rough up a scared girl, not face someone who moved like water and struck like lightning. One made the mistake of reaching for her. She caught his arm, twisted her whole body, and his thumb joint gave way like all the others. Section 7.126, she continued, her grandfather's words flowing through her. Aggravated assault on a federal officer's family member. That's your second mistake. Ryan tried to run. She crossed the distance in 3 steps, her voice cutting through chaos. Badge 4127. Freeze or I call it in. He froze. 20 years of cop shows had programmed the response, and Sloane used his hesitation to close distance. His thumb dislocated almost gently compared to the others. The mistake you all made, she said to the room full of writhing boys, was thinking I was prey. Tyler struggled to his feet, face twisted with rage and pain. You're dead. You hear me? My father will... Your father takes bribes from drug cartels, Sloane interrupted. Your brother runs distribution at State. Your whole family is a RICO case waiting to happen. And guess what? It's happening. She pulled out her phone, showed him the recording app still running. Every word, every threat, every confession, already uploaded to a federal server. That was a lie, but he didn't know that. You can't, nobody will believe. Officer Ramirez! Iris Chen's voice cut through as she burst in with the SRO and her camera. They attacked her. I saw everything. Ramirez took in the scene 6 boys with dislocated thumbs, one girl standing calm in the center. His hand moved to his radio, then stopped. He looked at Sloane, and she saw recognition in his eyes. "Mija," he said softly, "you're Danny's granddaughter." She nodded once. "These boys attacked you." His voice carried the weight of procedure now. "They surrounded me, sir. Tyler Brennan grabbed me. At first, I defended myself with minimum necessary force." "Minimum, she broke our thumbs," Connor wailed. "Dislocated," Sloane corrected. "Clean separation. No permanent damage if properly reset within 6 hours. My grandfather taught me the difference matters in court." Ramirez's lip twitched. "I'm sure he did. Iris, you recorded this. The aftermath. Yes, but I also have this." She held up her hard drive. 3 years of evidence about their drug operation. Names, dates, transactions. The room went still, except for the whimpering. "That's impossible," Tyler spat. You own nothing," a new voice said from the doorway. Ms. Chen entered, and Sloane realized she'd been wrong about the woman. Not naive, not playing a long game, playing the longest game. "Former federal prosecutor," Ms. Chen said, holding up her phone. "Current FBI consultant, and very interested in teenagers who think they can run trafficking operations through my school." Behind her, men and women in blue windbreakers filed in. FBI. The cavalry had arrived. "Fun fact about dislocated thumbs," Ms. Chen continued conversationally. "They make it very hard to destroy evidence on your phones, which we'll be collecting now." What followed was systematic. Phones confiscated, parents called. Miranda rights read to the soundtrack of Tyler's cursing and threats. Sloane gave her statement 3 times, each version identical, while EMTs reset thumbs and cops took pictures. "Where's Nate?" she asked Ramirez during a quiet moment. "Tyler's younger brother." The officer's face darkened. "Guidance office. Kid came in this morning with bruises and a notebook full of shipping schedules. Said he couldn't do it anymore." Another piece clicking into place. Nate's confession had probably triggered the morning's escalation, Tyler trying to clean house before his brother's betrayal exposed them. "Is he okay?" "He will be, thanks to you, in a roundabout way." Knowing someone stood up to his brother gave him courage to do the same. By noon, Preston Academy was in full crisis mode. News vans clustered outside like vultures while administrators scrambled to control the narrative. Isolated incident. No ongoing threat. Full cooperation with authorities. Sloane sat in the principal's office, her parents on either side. Her father looked older than she remembered. The price of 2 years playing ghost to keep his family safe. "The Baltimore office has been building this case for months," he said quietly. "We knew about the school connection, but couldn't get anyone inside. Then you. Then I got lucky," Sloane finished. "Wrong place, right time." Her mother squeezed her hand. "Luck had nothing to do with it." Principal Green cleared his throat. "Miss Mitchell, what you did today was remarkable. But I'm concerned about the violence." "Self-defense," her father interrupted. "Full FBI mode. 6 attackers, 1 defender. My daughter showed incredible restraint." "Be that as it may, what he's trying to say," Miss Chen interjected from the doorway, "is that the school is worried about liability, about image, about parents wondering if their children are safe." They weren't safe before, Sloane said quietly. They just didn't know it. Exactly, Ms. Chen smiled. Which is why I've proposed a solution. A new system for anonymous reporting. A way for students to share information without fear of retaliation. Silent Guardian, Iris said, appearing beside Ms. Chen with a laptop. I've already built the framework. Encrypted, anonymous. Direct to law enforcement when needed. No more Katie Morrisons. No more suffering in silence. Principal Green looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. The board will need to approve. The board will approve, Ms. Chen said pleasantly. Unless they want to explain why they ignored a drug ring operating under their noses. Why their security cameras mysteriously malfunction. Why their star athletes have been destroying other students for years. The meeting ended with grudging agreement and promises of full support that felt as empty as the trophy case would be after the lacrosse team's decimation. That evening, Sloane found herself back in the garage, her grandfather's radio crackling with life. The news was already breaking. Senator Brennan arrested on federal corruption charges. A multi-state trafficking ring dismantled. Dozens of arrests at the championship game. Players pulled off the field in handcuffs, while scouts and parents watched in horror. Badge 4127 to dispatch, she whispered to the static. Mission complete. The radio couldn't answer, but she felt her grandfather's presence anyway, in the weight of his ring on her finger, in the muscle memory that had saved her, in the lesson that violence was a language, but not the only one she spoke. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, but she recognized the syntax Tyler's brother Nate. Thank you. I'm safe now. Foster family seems nice. Maybe we can both stop looking over our shoulders. She typed back, maybe. Take care of yourself. Another message. This one from Iris Silent Guardian went live an hour ago. Already have 50 reports. Turns out we weren't the only ones with stories. Sloane smiled, thinking about all the quiet kids who'd found their voices, all the bullies who'd lost their power, all the systems that would have to change. She'd won today, but more importantly, she'd shown others how to win tomorrow. The next week, she stood before a self-defense class in the gym voluntary, but packed, not teaching them to dislocate thumbs or break wrists, teaching them awareness, de-escalation, escape routes. The physical skills were there, but buried under layers of better options. Real strength, she told them, echoing her grandfather, is knowing when not to fight. Real power is making sure you never have to. In the back row, she spotted a familiar face, Tyler Brennan, out on bail, both thumbs in splints. He wasn't supposed to be here, suspension pending expulsion, but security was notably absent. Their eyes met across the room. She waited for the anger, the threat, the promise of revenge. Instead, he looked hollow, defeated, like a predator realizing the jungle had changed and his fangs weren't enough anymore. After class, she found a note tucked under her windshield wiper. Tyler's handwriting. Shaky from the splints. I'm sorry. Not for what I did, I know sorry doesn't fix that. But for what I became. For what I let my family make me. Prison might be the only thing that saves me from becoming my father. Thank you for that. T. She kept the note, not as forgiveness that wasn't hers to give, but as reminder that even predators were prey to something bigger, that cycles could be broken, that sometimes the best punch was the one that knocked sense into someone instead of knocking them out. Months later, when the trials were done and the sentences handed down, When Silent Guardian had spread to schools across the state, and Iris Chen had won a journalism scholarship to Northwestern, when her father could finally use his real name again, and her mother could stop checking windows. Sloane stood in her grandfather's garage one last time. She turned off the radio, its static finally falling silent. In the quiet, she could hear her grandfather's voice one last time. "You did good, kid, but this is just the beginning." She knew he was right. There would always be Tyler Brennans, always be locker rooms where power ruled over justice. But now, there were also Sloane Mitchells, quiet kids with sharp edges, survivors who became guardians, voices that refused to be silenced. The garage door closed on her childhood, but her grandfather's lessons lived on, in her hands that knew how to hurt and heal, in her voice that could command and comfort, in her heart that understood sometimes the hardest fight was choosing not to fight at all. Badge 4127 had taught her to be a weapon, but she'd learned on her own how to be a shield, and that made all the difference.